Sony just released Firmware 2.0 for the Sony FX3, and this is a big one. It's got a lot of juicy enhancements to make your Sony FX3 that much better. However, word of caution, wait a week or two before applying this update because you never know, things can sometimes go south. Just ask Canon R6 owners with Firmware 1.4. Also, read the release notes. It's going to have all the details in there about what this fixed, the cumulative status of this firmware update, so I do recommend reading that. And now for the enhancements. One of the biggest ones that I personally think is to be able to provide 16-bit RAW output over HDMI. I love shooting in all-I and I love shooting log, and to be able to shoot and have 16-bit RAW to be able to edit, it really just changes the world. So that's a really big enhancement. But it's got some other enhancements as well, such as breathing compensation. So what is breathing compensation, you ask? Nope. Sony doesn't send you an air mask with oxygen that you can breathe for those shoots where you need it, and you know what I'm talking about. No, breathing compensation is for lenses that have some rather significant focus breathing, and I'm shooting with the f1.2, the 50mm f1.2 right now, and the focus breathing on this lens, it's like somebody who's completely out of shape, never ran a marathon, they've just run a 2-kilometer sprint, and they're out of breath. The focus breathing is so bad, you would swear that this is some sort of zoom lens, but it's not. So I'm really curious to know how effective this is on the FX3, because there's some really great technologies we have, such as digital stabilization, and sometimes based on its implementation, it can work really, really well, and sometimes it provides warping effects. So I'm wondering how well it can compensate for the breathing, the focus breathing on lenses, without any artifacts, and that's the real key here. Also real key, it's only effective in lenses that support it. So definitely Sony lenses, maybe not all of them. We don't have a list of what will be affected. And of course, third-party lenses may not support this. So some great things. We got 16-bit RAW output over HDMI. We got breathing compensation. We also have bokeh adjustment. And what bokeh adjustment is, you can adjust the bokeh without affecting exposure. So that's interesting too. We're seeing a lot of artistic changes here as well as some very functional ones. But also another interesting one is AI-based real-time subject tracking that works even when shooting with manual focus. And let me read this right to you. This is exactly what the announcement says. Adds AI-based real-time tracking autofocus. This allows real-time subject tracking even during manual focus. So I didn't make that up. That was not a slip of the tongue. So that's really, really interesting as well. What I love about Panasonic and their GH series cameras is how many video-centric features they provide and how they stay on screen when recording. Well, Sony has added to the FX3 4-channel audio meter on screen even during recording, so that's a really big enhancement as well. And this last feature that I want to bring up, I'm going to read this because I'll probably get it wrong, to be able to add greater support to high dynamic range and standard dynamic range when doing dual SR live production, and that's adding new features to support that. So this looks to be a really, really big update. But I still go back to those 3 top ones that I talked about. 16-bit RAW output over HDMI. I mean, that's really, really key. My camera does do 8K RAW output, but I don't shoot it very much because, well, processing and working with 8K takes a significant amount of processing power and storage. I really do wish the camera that I had 8K RAW output. I know you can't really do 4K RAW output on an 8K sensor. Did I buy wrong? Maybe I did. Maybe I should have gotten the FX3. The FX3 is shaping up to be a really, really good camera. And I also wonder, looking at Canon's R5C, could Canon do something similar in a future firmware update? Could they provide autofocus 2, which gives you vehicle detection, animal eye detection, and some of those other capabilities that people are screaming about? Obviously, we're not going to get IBIS in it, but here's the thing about cameras that we're buying today. We know this if we're buying from Sony, if we're buying this from Canon and Panasonic. The camera you buy is not the camera you're going to be shooting with in a year or two. The amount of enhancements and capabilities that are added to the camera in firmware updates afterwards are pretty significant. Now with the Canon R5C, we're not going to be able to add IBIS later on. There is digital stabilization, which is there, and they can improve upon that. But things such as autofocus, 16-bit RAW output, focus breathing compensation, bokeh adjustment, and all those sorts of capabilities, these are what add to a camera that make them better. And to see more and more of these capabilities being able to be try that again. Seeing these capabilities displayed on screen or the status on screen while recording makes a huge difference. Being able to see waveforms on screen, being able to see your 4-channel audio, being able to see these things on screen when we record are really, really important to the video process. When I'm shooting outside with my Canon R5, not having on-screen reporting of waveforms and stuff like that, it makes it a whole lot harder. I basically have to recompose a lot of times because I don't know how things are set up. When I hold my camera in a certain scene, I check, I make sure the ISO is correct, the exposure and all that, and I start shooting. But once I press the record button, I know that if I start to pan, I'm not sure how well that's going to work. Now, in most cases, I will be wide open or I'll change it to the point where I know that I'm going to get what I want. And if I have to move the camera, then quite often I'll stop recording and retest things out and adjust if need be. And I've gotten to the point where I can do this pretty quickly. But adding more capabilities for monitoring the recording of not only our video but our audio is a really, really big deal, especially on a video-centric camera like the FX6. So Sony, good job, well done on this firmware update 2.0. And if you do have the FX6, let me know what you think of this firmware update. Will you be applying it right away, or will you be waiting the mandatory 1 to 2 week? I want to be careful. Or is this enough to persuade you, stop the FOMO, to really consider the FX6 as your camera? Now, one thing I do want to mention, later today at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, that's New York or Toronto time, I'm going to be doing a live stream. And the point of this live stream, it's a weekly live stream where I talk about camera news this week. We're going to talk about the firmware update. This firmware update's a little more in detail. We're also going to talk about the rumor of a Sony a7R5 and the A9 Mark III. This week we've gotten some information that sheds light that maybe the rumor is completely false. Let's take a look at that and let's see the truth behind this, because if we look at how old these cameras are, October 2019, well, we could get an update in 2022. Around the 3-year mark is certainly when you can start to see camera updates or refreshes. However, here's the thing. The A9, do we really need that now that we have the A1? Should we just put all our effort into the A1? So that's a question. And with Sony waiting 5 years for the A7S III update, are we still another year or two away from an update of the A9 Mark III or the A7R5? So we'll talk about that, but this is a cross-denominational channel. We're going to talk about Canon, Nikon, the WOW camera, Panasonic GH6. There's an awful lot to talk about today. So come along, everyone's welcome. Put your questions in, drop your comments, and we'll have a great discussion live tonight at 6 p.m. New York time, Toronto, Montreal, Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Not only does it help this channel grow, but I take it as a virtual pat on the back. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.